Should divers feed sharks and other fish of the sea? Some surprising answers to this controversy when we return.
To feed or not to feed? That is the question. And the answer for most divers is both emotional and personal. Divers are also almost equally divided between those who love it and those who downright hate it.
Yeah, for the anti-fish feeders and the anti-shark feeders, their argument is that they just simply shouldn't feed those animals. Firstly, it reduces the animals to circus performers. Secondly, it's harmful to the animals and to the environment. And thirdly, in the case of sharks, it's downright dangerous to human beings.
On the other hand, those who are in favor of fish feeding and shark feeding say there's been no credible scientific evidence presented that these dives do any harm to the environment or to the fish. They say that, too, for decades, these fish feeding and shark feeding dives have been going on unnoticed and without any harm to humans that we know of. And three, that the real cause of shark bites is fishing, which draws sharks to the shore. If shark feeds were causing bites to humans, the bites would be taking miles offshore where the fish feeding is going on.
Now, making matters worse is a national media still caught in the Hollywood Jaws mentality, willing to just hype up the gruesome in order to boost their ratings.
Our approach on Dive Today is simple. We're going to show you the evidence and let you make up your own mind. To feed or not to feed? The answers when we return. If you've never been on one of these shark feeding dives before, take a look at this one. San Diego, blue water, cages, lots of sharks. See what you think. Paul Ains, seen here donning an anti-shark suit, runs San Diego Shark Expeditions. His trips provide the kind of high-voltage shark dive most TV viewers associate with this activity. Paul's method is to chum the water with fish parts and fish blood in order to attract sharks to the boat. Without this chumming, these oceanic sharks would rarely, if ever, be seen by divers. Soon the payoff comes swimming in, the blue shark, distinguished by a long, sleek body, pointed nose, and big eyes surrounded by a white ring. As you can see, Paul uses chum to attract sharks to himself, let them latch on, then work them toward the cage where divers can get an up-close look at this beautiful animal during its scavenging, feeding behavior. The shark's second type of feeding behavior is predatory, on small fish and squid, which are definitely not on the menu here. Paul also deliberately entices the blue sharks to tussle with the chum, even bringing the bait close to his chainmail protected arm so he can take the shark to the tourist. Clearly, these sharks are interested in the chum, not the humans, which is almost always the case with sharks, even in the wild. In a group feeding, sharks become curious about things like camera housings, and the juveniles insist they get their fair share. If it's thrill you want, here you'll get your fair share. Is this a good thing? The only known attacks on humans from blues have been dead or injured bodies at sea due to catastrophes. No beach attacks. The blue shark is now endangered by overfishing. If you want to see this animal in the wild, San Diego Shark Expeditions is the only place you can do it. Are they providing a service or a circus sideshow? You decide.
During a planned shark feeding dive, like the one you just saw, sharks usually display only one of their two types of feeding behaviors, scavenging rather than predatory. Now, to give you some perspective, let's go and see how they would feed naturally.
This Caribbean reef shark, judging by the gouges on its dorsal fin, has been in a few tussles defending its territory. This species roams the reef shallows, using electromagnetic sense to detect struggling fish. Here you see two nurse sharks attempting to capture prey hiding in a reef crevice. Nurse sharks use twin barbels, whisker-like organs on their front jaw to locate prey hiding in the sand or in reef holes. They eat spiny lobster, octopus, crabs, sea urchins, and mollusks. Once they locate their prey, nurse sharks like these two use their mouth and throat to create a suction pressure that literally sucks small prey from between rocks or from the sand. The sound that nurse sharks make when doing this is similar to the suckling sound of a nursing infant, thus the shark's name. After the prey is captured, nurse sharks use their strong jaws and small teeth to crack the shells of lobster and mollusk, then crush its victims. This is predatory behavior and is rarely seen by humans.
In this next segment, we're headed down to visit the father and the grandfather of critter feeding in the Florida Keys, Spencer Slade at Atlantis Divers. Slade started feeding barracuda ballyhoo from between his teeth and has since progressed on to a variety of other critters. When we go down there, we're going to have a blast watching him do it. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about general safety rules on any critter dive that you participate in.
Yeah, firstly, really important to remember to keep those hands in. Those fingers can look like very tasty morsels, so keep your hands in. Also, keep your gauges in too. Keep them somewhere where you can check them easily. So again, you're not putting your hands out to try and hold them.
Exactly. And speaking of movement, any movement that you do make down there, make sure it's slow and deliberate. You don't want excited movements adding to the excitement down there. And keep your distance. Whatever that distance is dictated by your dive plan. Whether it's 20 feet or kneeling in the sand, make sure you obey the rules.
Also, make sure you keep your buddy very close to you. God forbid if something was to happen, but you need that support system if something were to happen. Also, be aware of aggressive movements of the animals you might be with. For sharks, for instance, extended pectoral fins or a raised back, maybe a smiley mouth if you're lucky. Well, lucky.
Speaking of the smiling mouths, don't feed the fishes unless you've been trained to do so, and whether or not you have been given permission to do so. Both of those are important. And lastly, when you choose your operator, make sure it's an operator who has a good reputation for doing this for a good long time in a healthy, environmentally friendly way that will benefit both you and the critters down there.
Captain Slade's creature feature dives certainly qualify as safe and environmentally friendly. Here's how they're conducted.
We actually have people sit in a circle around me or in front of me, and I actually have the animals attracted to me from the bait. That's really all they're interested in when they come up to me. And at some point, the nurse sharks will free swim around in the circle just because they're on the bottom, and I let people touch and pet their fins and rub their back, and I don't let them grasp and hold on to them and put any pressure on them or impede any of their movement. So that's what we call the interaction. Just actually touching the top of an animal or the side of an animal is really an exhilarating experience for them, and that's really all we do. When I put the ballyhoo, the little bait fish I use to feed the critters with, in my mouth, hold it in my teeth for the barracuda to come by and take it, what I'm trying to do is, it's not a gimmick or a trick as much as I'm trying to demonstrate to our divers just how accurate this predator fish is, which of course the barracuda to me is the apex predator. He has no common enemies in the ocean. And to show just how exact these hunters really are, and that they're not in fact interested in any divers. I wouldn't let them come that close to my face. They're interested in getting the fish, and that's how they hunt.
Captain Slade conducts the feeding dive only once per week for good reason.
I don't want the fish that we feed, the groupers, the moor eels, the barracudas, and the nurse sharks, I don't want them to become dependent on divers to provide food for them. And a lot of times I go out there and the fish that I usually see are not even there. There's no fish at all to feed because they're not in an aquarium, they're in the ocean, so they can free swim and go about where they want.
Recently, Florida banned these dives, but Captain Slade uses federal waters.
It has no relation whatsoever to last summer's small rash of shark bites. In fact, we all know that the rash of shark bites that got the concern of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission had nothing to do with normal years. It was actually lower than before. So we know that the real issues are fishing on the beach, fishing from piers. We've documented this time and time again, and there's not a marine biologist, whether pro or con fish feeding, that will deny that the reason fish are attracted to the beach, sharks if you will, are fishing piers where blood is routinely dumped over the side, the first draw, first shark, erratic and splashing movements in the surf, mimicking a fish being reeled in by bathers and bad visibility, which is a mistaken identity, and that's how they get bitten.
For Captain Slade, his creature feature dives off the reefs of Key Largo serve a higher purpose than mere entertainment. He believes something special and important is happening between diver and animal.
These creatures are to be loved and protected, not harmed or killed. They're out there just like you and I on land to live, breed, and die. And we want them to be able to do that cycle. And when they're out there in the ocean, for us to come in as visitors and get a chance to look at them up close, which we do in our feedings, it's a wonderful event. And I've taken people out that have dove all over the world, very seasoned divers that would come back on a boat and say that was the best dive they had ever had. When it's all said and done, we feel that the fish interaction dives with creature features are a benefit to both. First, man gets to interact with creatures in their natural environment rather as opposed to an aquarium. And the fish are free to interact with us. They get to come up, they get a free snack, and they get to swim away. So to us, it's a win-win situation, and people come back with a wonderful, warm, fuzzy feeling about predators of the deep that they may have had a unfounded fear of.
John Stewart is the president of the Global Interactive Marine Encounter Group. He also represents the entire dive industry in the state of Florida. Recently, we spoke with John about the current controversy surrounding Florida's decision to ban all fish feeding dives in the state.
Thank you very much for joining us today, John.
I'm happy to be here, David.
You know, I think the first thing our viewers would want to know is exactly what this ban says.
Well, it's easy to explain, but very difficult to understand. What this ban means is that anybody in the state of Florida waters who is wearing a mask, fins, scuba equipment cannot feed marine life in the state. Unless, of course, the purpose is to harvest that animal. You can feed them if you want to kill them, but if you want to photograph and look at them, that's against the law.
Does this ban serve the people of Florida?
For over 30 years that this activity has been going on, there's never been a single bite incident on a beach or an attack directly related to a shark feeding operation. Even though the data shows that it's not a problem, public perception and fear of sharks is what created the frenzy that resulted in this ban. Two species are fed in the state of Florida, nurse sharks, Caribbean reef sharks. Neither one of those sharks have been implicated in any of the attacks, particularly the high-profile attacks in the state of Florida last year. So if you subscribe to the belief that somehow these shark-feeding dives create a public safety hazard for beachgoers because the sharks are going to swim up on the beach looking for food, you'd have to believe that the sharks that are being fed are somehow sending shark emails to the sharks who are creating the shark attacks on the beach, which of course is ridiculous.
Well, if it doesn't serve the people of Florida, then why, in your opinion, did it happen?
Well, the opposition, the people opposed to this practice, did a very good job of creating a media frenzy, and if you'll remember the Summer of the Sharks in Florida last year, to create a perception that this was somehow created a public safety issue. And with all the media hype, and the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is the only people who could govern this activity, we feel very strongly that they succumbed to the media pressure and the public pressure to improve safety, which of course is not true.
So what you're about to see is illegal. You take a look and make up your own mind as to whether or not this activity presents a danger to humans, the animals, and the environment.
This is the dive that has embroiled the state of Florida in controversy for the last 2 years. About a mile offshore South Florida's Pompano Beach area, dive operators like Jeff Turow at South Florida Diving Headquarters began feeding fish so divers could watch them up close. Lots of them showed up, fish and divers. Jeff started attracting snappers, groupers, southern stingrays, jewfish, nurse sharks, moray eels, and more. But it was the nurse sharks that became the center of attention. A group of spear fishermen, calling themselves the Marine Safety Group, was opposed to a Broward County Marine Park that had been proposed to protect the area. The Marine Safety Group used the fact that sharks were being fed a mile from beaches to conduct a campaign of fear about the dangerous sharks offshore. At first, the ban that the group proposed was rejected outright by the state, but then came Florida's Summer of the Shark and the Jesse Arbogast tragedy. The Fish and Wildlife Commission reversed itself and enacted the ban. The ruling was puzzling on a factual basis. Even scientists opposed to fish feeding readily admit that nurse sharks pose no threat to humans unless intentionally provoked. Nurse sharks are known as one of the sea's laziest and most docile creatures. It rarely ventures more than a mile from its home on the bottom. This is the reason nurse sharks do well in captivity and are the sharks most often seen in aquariums. They need little room to roam, and they don't have to swim constantly to push water over their gills in order to breathe, as most shark species must. How could an animal that lives on the bottom, rarely moves, and feeds mainly on mollusks be a menace to the beaches of Florida? To be fair, the media had effectively frightened the beachgoers of Florida that summer, although overall the number of shark attacks were down. The Florida Commission felt it owed some response to its citizens. As a result, what you are seeing is illegal. Now, what are dive operators doing to comply with this new law?
Well, dive operators like Jeff Turow at the South Florida Diving Headquarters simply goes out, uses the same chum box he's been using for 4 years, throws it down on the bottom empty. The sharks come, the tourists go down, they have a great dive, and they all come back up. Then Jeff takes that same chum box, fills it full, and throws it down. The sharks start eating. Jeff throws a fishing line into the water. He's now illegal. Dolphin dives have also recently come under the microscope of controversy. So let's go to the Anthony's Key Resort in the Bay Islands of Honduras for one of the most unique dolphin dives in the world. You go out into the open ocean on scuba, down to about 40 to 60 feet, and the dolphins come. They inspect you, they caress you. You take a look at this and tell me who's having more fun, the dolphins or the divers.
The Anthony's Key Dolphin Program is unique. Divers interact with the dolphins only at the dolphins' initiative. The animals are free to come and go as they wish in an unstructured environment. Although the dolphins normally stay within a 2-acre enclosure of water, there is a reserved private area where the animals may go at any time should they choose not to be with humans. As a result, it's the dolphins' natural curiosity, not a feeding enticement, that is the basis of their interaction with humans. Out on the shallow reef, divers can observe dolphins in open water, well away from the resort. The animals sometimes come to interact with divers. Sometimes they roam the reef and hunt. One of the few places on Earth where you can watch dolphins hunt underwater in the wild.
Want to know what the most popular dive site in the world is? That's easy. Stingray City on Grand Cayman, British West Indies. Here's the story about it. The native fishermen in the area used to come into the lagoon there, about a 12-foot sandbar, after a long day of fishing. There they would clean and dress their fish, throwing fish parts overboard. Well, the fish in the area got used to coming in for a free meal every day. Among the animals that came in was a family of stingrays, related to the shark family. Gradually over the years, due to the great diet and the plentiful food, this family of stingrays multiplied until now there are 50, hundreds of these stingrays down there. There are 3 great things about this dive that you'll love. One, it's easy. It's only in about 12 feet of water. You can do it as a snorkel, or you can do it as a first-time diver who's never even dived before. If you want to do it, you can. Second great thing is that you get to participate. You can actually take the squid and the ballyhoo down there and hold them up and feed those stingrays yourself. Feel their plates, their vacuum-like mouths coming right over your hand underneath their bellies. And the last thing is that you get to experience the wild beauty of these stingrays floating all around you like ballerinas in the water. It's an amazing experience. You'll love it.
Stingray City is one of the few places where divers and snorkelers can swim with stingrays, who've gotten a bum rap over the years as devilfish. Enchantment, not fear, is the usual result of spending a few minutes on the 12-foot bottom with these gentle, graceful creatures that come flying at you like magic carpets or stealth bombers. Choose your simile. Regardless of what you call them, the rays come faithfully, looking for a bit of fish that they've been accustomed to being fed for over 15 years. The divers are reaching under the rays because that's where the animal's mouth is. The ray doesn't have teeth, but 2 rough plates that it uses to crush its prey of crabs, shellfish, conch, and an occasional fish. Most people don't realize that stingrays only use their venomous, razor-sharp barbs at the base of their tail as a defense mechanism, never to attack. Matter of fact, when swimming, rays cannot direct their tail and are defenseless and harmless to divers. Stingrays only cause trouble for humans in shallow water areas, and only if stepped on by mistake, as the ray lies buried in the sand. Another common misconception: when buried, the ray is eating, not sleeping. They use highly developed electroreceptors and an acute sense of smell to locate their prey, then cover it with their body, then cover their bodies to hide from their main predator, sharks, while they feed. No wonder the rays love this dive as much as the tourist. They're safe and satiated. Stingray City, another example of who is exploiting whom.
In this week's Gear Tip segment, we're going to be talking about a crucial piece of dive gear, this book, Reef Fish Behavior. It's part of the Reef set published by New World Publications and consists of reef fish identification, reef coral identification, and reef creature identification, the invertebrates, as well as this behavior book. Here's why I think they're so important. So many divers first start diving because of the thrill of breathing on scuba, of floating weightless in this calm, peaceful world, and then after that thrill is gone, they have little to keep them diving. We've found that once you start learning the names, the behaviors, and the ecology of what's down there, you become more deeply involved. You start appreciating the delicate ecological balance that consists of a coral reef. And with that understanding and that appreciation, your involvement in this world and in this sport will continue to grow throughout your life.
Thanks for joining us on our special critter feeding show. We'll see you next week on Dive Today. Until then, dive safe and dive often.